y'all, Amber here. Alright, I'm going to preface this with a couple of things. One, her character has changed since this voiceover thing. As in, what I am reading out is going to be a short story that I wrote for her a few years back. Like 7 years ago. Secondly, this is 100% unedited. Please do not come at me for bad grammar or phrasing or whatever. This thing was written like close to a decade ago, I think. And I honestly did not bother editing it. Alright. Well, here it goes. The first story in the trilogy that I kind of forced out, called Darkness. Beep, beep, beep. It was so steady, the beeping. I didn't know what it was that I was hearing, and even if I'd wanted to find out what it was, I couldn't. I couldn't move, could barely even think, never mind doing anything else. Where was I? How did I get here? The last thing I could remember was being in bed, at home. I had just crawled into bed for the night, after one hellish day dealing with irritating children. I guess I fell asleep, or perhaps I was drugged, and was brought here. Wherever here was. It was slow, but eventually everything started to clear. I could hear voices in the distance. They sounded like they were several rooms away from me, with how poorly I could hear them. I could barely make out what they were saying, but at least I could make out something. I didn't know what it was that I was supposed to be listening for, though, of course. How could I? I was just waking up after whatever had happened to me. I had no clue, and something told me I wouldn't find out anytime soon, either. A woman's voice was broken up as it was coming through, I'm guessing, walls. It was almost as if I was listening to an old radio that was desperately in need of being kicked to the curb. I didn't know what it was she was saying exactly, but I could almost glean an idea. Do you have It was piecing together more and more, the audio. I could hear things clearer, as if they were closer, not through so many walls. But it was still as if my ears were filled with water. Or cotton. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I hated it. My hearing had always been amazing. And to lose it so suddenly like this, it wasn't something that I wanted to go through. No. Just no. After that, though, everything faded. What little I heard was gone, moments before I lost all perception of anything. When I woke, I had no idea if all that had truly happened. At first, I honestly thought that I was back home, at least until I looked around. It didn't take me long to realize that the white and red walls weren't the ones that I had in my bedroom. No, my walls had been pale spearmint green. Instantly, alarm bells were ringing in my head, and it was loud enough that I could almost literally hear them. I shot up in bed when the pain in my head became apparent. I could barely think as I brought my hands up and grasped tightly. It was too loud, far too loud. I didn't even notice someone coming into my room, or rather, whatever room I was in, until I found myself lying down again, the pain gone. I wanted to question it, but when I opened my mouth to try, I found that my voice was gone. I couldn't speak. My melodic and harmonious voice was gone. Whomever it was that was there, someone that I now noticed was a man, just patted me on the head lightly, in a rather condescending manner, I might add, before getting to his feet and walking off. Didn't take long, only a couple of seconds, before he was at the door again. He left me alone, returned to wherever he had been before. I couldn't help but wonder, did he hear the bells too? The alarms? Whatever they were. I had no idea. I couldn't help but wonder if it was in my head, if I was going crazy or something. It didn't take long before I decided to not worry about all of that, though. I had to figure out where I was, right? Right. So the first thing I needed to do regarding that was to get to my feet and look around. I found that shockingly easy. I couldn't believe it, really. For some reason, I think I had it in my head that I'd be bound to the bed, or drugged to the point that I couldn't get up. I don't know why I was thinking that, but perhaps it had something to do with the fact that I had read too many books and watched too many movies in my life. I knew how kidnapped women generally were treated. Yet, it didn't seem like I was on the receiving end of anything other than the fact that I was a victim of an abduction. What the hell is going on? I wondered as I looked around. The walls were white and red, with the red looking like fresh blood running down the walls. I tried not to focus on them for too long, or the odd black music notes that seemed to be scattered throughout the room. Following the notes, though, Since it seemed my eyes were naturally drawn to them, I did notice something odd about them. They almost seemed to glow, and it was easy to tell, although I don't know why or how I could tell, that they did actually play something out. That was definitely something I would have to look into. I knew that, and I vowed mentally and silently that I would be back to do that. I had to find out where I was first. There was no way that I could let myself get caught up trying to figure something like that out, some sort of puzzle, until I found out if I was somewhere safe, which I seriously doubted, or not. I wouldn't allow myself to get caught up. No. I would soon find out, though, that I didn't have a choice. The notes seemed to call to me, almost as if they were beckoning me, calling my name quite literally. I had no idea why, and looking back on it, I really only picked up on it on a subconscious level, but they were. I couldn't explain it at the time, but I was quickly finding that I didn't much care to try to explain it. Why should I? It made sense to me, for some reason. Wasn't that enough? I made my way to the notes and quickly set to work rearranging them. As I was doing so, there was some small part of my brain that was telling me to stop, trying to get me to quit playing with the notes that were on the wall and start trying to figure out where I was. I ignored it though, and the louder it got within my head, the more I found myself focused on the notes on the wall, the notes I was rearranging. I was so engrossed and tranced by the seemingly glowing notes on the walls that I didn't even notice the door opening, or the footsteps of someone walking up to me until they tapped me on the shoulder. Immediately I was pulled back to this world, instead of whatever world I was in, and jumped rather violently as I whirled around. "Hey, relax," the man who was standing at the door said calmly. "I know you're mute. You're also really lost at the moment, aren't you?" he asked. His voice was really something that I could sit and listen to for hours, if not longer. Of course, that really was all dependent on whether or not I was allowed to. It didn't take long before he was talking more. I guess I must have nodded or something in response to his question, and I found myself getting lost in the sounds that were coming from his mouth, his throat, his voice box. I didn't know what to think, and I couldn't think anything above and beyond how much I loved what I was hearing. Suddenly, the next thing I knew, his hands were on my shoulders, shaking me. "Hey, come on, snap out of it," he exclaimed, obviously rather irritated. When I was able to finally think again, although I did still feel as if I was atop a mountain of clouds, I could barely think at the moment, but my head was clearing, thankfully. "You okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. I just looked up at him, and apparently whatever he saw on my face he didn't like. He just cursed before shaking his head. "I'll be back," he said before walking off, leaving me to wonder what was going on, and pray that he would return sooner rather than later. I didn't know him, but there was something about him, about his voice, that drew me in. Where the hell am I, and who the hell was that? I wondered after a few minutes. I shook my head and got to my feet, wondering what the hell it was that I was going to do around here. The white and red walls were unnerving to me, since the red splotches looked too much like blood that had hit the wall and dried, not taking into consideration that red was a color to incite anger, of course. Those two factors were enough to make me want to get the hell out of there. I made my way over to the door and hesitated a moment before trying to open it. I was shocked to find that it wasn't locked, that it opened without a hitch, and was pleasantly surprised to find that the hall looked normal. It was definitely welcome. Without any delay, I stepped into the hall, the door to the room I was in closing softly behind me, and started walking. I was in the last room of the hall. There was the hall and a wall, so logically I took the hall. I walked past several rooms, not knowing what it was that I was to think, do, or even make of the area. There were a lot of doors in the hall, and I could hear some noises from within the rooms I walked past. I had no idea what to make of them, and the more I heard, the more my skin felt like it was crawling. I just wanted out of there, and it became rather apparent when I broke into a dead run down the hall. I followed it, turning randomly down other halls, hoping to make my way out. I hadn't even seen a single window yet, so I was seriously starting to wonder if I was trapped. It didn't take me much longer, surprisingly enough, before I reached a rather large open room that had windows all around. It was then that I remembered a small detail. My room had a window. I just paid it no heed. The curtains matched the walls' paint, and it just seemed to blend in a bit. Once I reached the room, though, I relaxed, and very noticeably. I wasn't as trapped as I had originally thought it seemed. I may not have been free yet, but at least there was a way out. At least there was that, and that was all I had to take solace in at the moment. "Oh, Rebecca, you're awake," a calm voice said behind me. I jumped, whirled around, backed up as I moved. "Please, no need to be afraid," she continued. I was too panicked at the moment to even notice her appearance at the time. I was too wrapped up in my thoughts of how I was trapped, even if it had lessened. She walked forward, her blonde hair tied back in a bun that made it impossible to tell how long it was, and her sea-blue eyes seemingly nothing more than pools of the deepest and most gorgeous parts of the ocean. Even now, as I'm telling you all this, I find myself sighing dreamily at her eyes. I'd always loved the ocean. I'd never known why for so long, but after learning more about myself, I knew. It was a natural thing for me, and there was definitely no way that I couldn't love the sea. It was almost as if I was a mermaid, really. My appreciation of it was that deep. Sorry, I derailed there. Where was I? Oh, right, the woman. She reached a hand out to me, calmly, almost as if asking my permission to touch me. It was then that I noticed that she seemed to be wearing a nurse's uniform, which I definitely found odd. Where was I that warranted a nurse's uniform? Immediately, my mind was racing. Was I in some sort of sex movie unwillingly? Was I being trained to become a sex slave? There was so much. I couldn't make sense of it all for almost 5 minutes. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in one of the chairs beneath a window that was there, and the blonde was sitting next to me, rubbing my back. "Hey, relax. You're all right," she said, her voice calm and rather soothing. I just looked to her. A bit of a puzzled and scared expression on my face, which just net a chuckle from the blonde. "You're too cute. You know that?" she asked. "I'll arrange for your voice to be returned to you," she added, which just made me look even more confused. "They stole my voice. What? How does someone—" Immediately, my hands went to my throat, alarm in my eyes as I felt for a scar, for stitches, a fresh wound. Anything. They had to have stolen my voice box. That was the only thing I could think of that they could do to steal my voice. The woman just chuckled slightly. Again. "Don't worry. It's been blocked, I guess you could say. You'll be fine. No harm done physically. Perhaps mentally, though," she told me, muttering the last part under her breath slightly. "Anyway, stay put. I'll go get that set up then," she said before getting to her feet. "Are you going to be okay?" I couldn't help but silently growl at her when she asked that. Her tone, even though I knew she was meaning it to sound kind, just sounded condescending to me. She seemed to pick up on that and sighed slightly. "I'm sorry, but it's an honest question. Will you be okay sitting there? Or do you think your nerves are going to get in the way?" she asked. I just sighed and shook my head, not knowing if she would know what I meant by that. I meant that I would be fine, that no, my nerves wouldn't get in the way. This seemed to be the only way that I could get answers, after all. Of course, I would be there, waiting. I would do what I needed to get the answers I felt I deserved. She seemed to get the idea and made her way over to a computer. She typed something in at a shockingly fast rate, too. There was no way that I could guess how many keys she hit. The speed at which her fingers moved seemed to not be humanly possible. I could barely keep up, and even then, I still tried. As I was there, trying to count the keystrokes, I didn't notice someone walking up to me, nor did I notice that I'd been trying to count them for nearly 20 minutes. "You must be Rebecca," a male's voice said serenely. I was torn away from the sound of the keys by his voice. It wasn't something shocking, but it was something that would pull you away from whatever you were focusing on. I looked up to him and just nodded. "Come with me. We'll get you speaking again," he said with a smile. I nodded, again, and got to my feet. He took my hand gently, and I nearly melted where I stood when he did that before he led me off. We walked through some halls and to an office, which he ushered me into kindly. "Sit, Rebecca," he said with a smile as he pulled a chair out from the small table that was there. I looked at him for a moment before sitting down on it, wishing he would touch me again. I had no idea why, but his touch was nothing short of amazing, and I could feel myself being lifted off and floated away as he held my hand. Now, this may be a bit painful for you, but hold still. I'll give you your voice back," he said as he cupped my chin lightly. I just nodded, wanting to do whatever he wanted at the moment and not caring what it was. Not really. Moments later, I felt his hand, the one not grasping my chin, against my throat, holding it as if he was about to choke me. Instead, I felt a prickling sensation that quickly escalated to stabbing. Moments before it stopped. I let out a small shriek, though. The pain was remaining, and it hurt far more than my pain tolerance would allow me to stay silent about. "Feel better, Rebecca?" he asked as he removed his hand and stepped back. I looked to him and nodded before shaking my head. "Where the hell am I?" I asked, demanding an answer as I got to my feet. "You fucking abducted me, and no one is telling me anything. Where am I, and how the fuck do I get out of here?" My voice was harsh, and at the time I had no idea why I was feeling as if it was too harsh. There was some part of me that was deep in the recesses of my mind that was saying that I shouldn't be so mean to him, that I knew what was going on, and that I had agreed to it. That part of me, though, was silenced by another part, the logical part, I reasoned. There was no way that I had agreed to this, and no way that I knew what the hell was going on. The man just sighed. "Rebecca, my name is Riley. I'm the second in command here," he told me. At least I was getting some information, it seemed. I crossed my arms under my breast to listen. "You agreed to come in to protect yourself, and those you care about a week ago," he told me. I couldn't believe the audacity this man had, lying to me like that. "Here, watch this. We recorded it due to the fact that most people don't believe us when we tell them," he said before making his way to the far wall. He flipped a couple switches, or something, I couldn't really see him, but when he stepped back, a TV that was built into the wall, that I thought was just a fish tank, lit up and started playing something. I witnessed the recording, a recording that I had no recollection of, play through. In it, I came running up to the man that was in the room with me, begging for him to help me. He agreed, outlined something, although I missed some of it due to the fact that my mind was racing. I signed something, and it ended. "Where is what I signed?" I asked with a bit of a snarl, far more of one than I actually needed. "Right here," he said as he retrieved a folder from the wall, a shelving unit that was built into it and beside the TV. He walked over and handed me the folder, which I promptly flipped through. It had my signature in several locations, and there was no way to mistake it as someone else's, and no way that someone tried to forge mine. It was my signature, through and through. Appeased, for now, I set the folder down and looked straight at him. Appeased, for now, I set the folder down and looked straight at him. What did I agree to? He looked at me with a bit of a shocked expression, almost as if he had expected me to know that, somehow. He managed to compose himself after a minute, though. "You agreed to stay here so as to avoid causing any harm to anyone that would fall victim to you," he told me, "and that you would allow us to try various things on you in an attempt to have it that you won't affect others." I couldn't believe what it was that he had said. What the hell could I be scared of doing to hurt others? What the hell was it that I could do? Since apparently, obviously, there was something. I knew that doctoring videos and recordings were possible, but I didn't think that he'd go so far as to do it with that. I had no idea why I trusted him suddenly, but I did. "Which is why we stripped you of your voice in an attempt to help," he continued. I barely heard what he was saying, and it didn't take long before he was ushering me out of the room while I was stunned, shocked, and surprised as all hell. I couldn't follow what he'd been saying, had barely been able to keep up with it all, and had no idea what all he had said, even. I was silent as I was led back to my room. I didn't even truly realize it. My thoughts were too wrapped up in all I had been told, even though I didn't pick up on it at the moment. I couldn't really pick up on it all, since it was far too much. But I think I may have been making some progress with it. A few hours later, or maybe a few days, I had absolutely no concept of time while there, since it always seemed that it was either always night or always day, depending on where I was. It was rather disconcerting and confusing as well. There was no way I could figure it out easily, and it seemed that the clocks were non-existent there, too. The watch I'd had when, I guess, I'd agreed to be taken in had been removed along with my cell phone. That one irritated me, or rather pissed me off. That was a $600 phone, damn it. As I was trying to figure out what it was that was going on, and what day it was, along with whether or not I should believe him and what he told me, I wasn't paying attention to anyone or anything, which wasn't that surprising. Whenever I got something going through my head that I needed to focus on, I was always just focusing on just that. It was rare for me to notice anything else at those times. I was broken from my thoughts by someone walking into the room and tapping on my shoulder to get my attention. "Hey, Rebecca." When I turned to look at who it was, I saw that it was the same blonde as before. Hi," I said, almost hesitantly as I sat up a bit. I'd been lying on the bed when she came in. "I just thought I would let you know that the boss man wants to see you," she told me. "I'm not sure what about, though," she added, which just made me even more puzzled and curious. By this point, I figured out that they didn't mean me any harm. I was treated well, and I found out why I was there, but that was something that I hadn't really had time to dwell on. Okay, where? Come on, I'll lead you there," the blonde said with a smile. I nodded and got to my feet before following her out of the room, which I made sure to close the door of, and down the halls. So, what's your name? I asked as we walked, not wanting to be walking in silence, since I always did hate that. Oh, it's Kaylee, she told me with a smile. How are you feeling? Adapting well? She asked. I didn't really know what to say, how to answer that. How was I adapting well? I'd been there for a while, no idea how long, and it all seemed to be the same thing each day. How long have I been here? I asked, almost hesitantly. Oh, about 3 weeks now, Kaylee told me with a smile. Her smile faded, though, as she saw my shocked expression. Are you all right, Rebecca? I'm shocked that it's already been that long, I answered. Oh, I know what you mean. When I first came here, I didn't realize I'd been here for 2 months before someone told me, she admitted with a small chuckle. Don't worry about it. You'll get used to the aura of this place, how time seems to be a bit skewed at first. Okay, but why are there no clocks, and why the perpetual night and day in some areas? I asked. Oh, well, the clocks are because of the fact that some of those that are here aren't very good with clocks. They follow them too closely, and the perpetual night or day is to accommodate for those that are here. There are some that cannot be in the sunlight or cannot be in the moonlight, she answered. And before you ask, no, I cannot tell you how we do it. And she added before I had a chance to open my mouth. I had been just about to ask her that exact question. How was that done? But she beat me to it. I didn't get a chance to say anything else before we reached the room that I was supposed to be meeting someone in. As we neared, I listened. I could hear some talking through the wall we were walking by, and I was sure I wasn't supposed to hear it. What I heard made me seriously question whether or not it was a good idea for me to be quite so complacent while there. Are you sure? The first voice was rough, very tough. Sounded as if the one that owned it would be one that you wouldn't want to run into in an alleyway. His voice made it sound like he would beat someone into submission without a moment's hesitation. I didn't even have a chance to consider cringing or suppressing said cringe before someone else continued. Yes, perfectly. We checked her ancestry. She is the one that the prophets have stated would be coming. The second voice was calmer and sounded a lot like the one man from before. What was his name? Oh, right, Riley. As if that's enough! The first voice wasn't happy, and it was painfully easy to hear. Sir, we have also tested her genetics, Riley stated. We know it's her. She has the mark in her blood. Before anything more was said, or could be said, we reached the door and Kaylee knocked. Instantly, the voices in the room were silenced, and I quickly found myself getting to be more and more anxious regarding this. I had no idea what to make of all this, or what to think regarding the fact that there was a conversation going on in the room I was about to go in that seemed like it could have almost been about me. I tried to reason with myself, convince myself that I was just being paranoid as the door was opened and I was ushered in. The door closed behind me, which made me jump and yell out a bit. Relax, Rebecca, Riley said. When I turned to face him, I saw that it was, in fact, Riley, and someone else I didn't know. I'd never seen him before, but that wasn't too hard to believe, not really. At the same time, though, I found myself having a hard time believing that, since I was sure that I should have recognized his face. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. Don't patronize her, Riley, the other man snarled. She's the one we need. Instantly, I backed up, my hands reaching behind me towards the door handle. I didn't know what to think, and I didn't know how to react. What was I to do? To think? What the hell could I even do? Don't scare her, Devin, Riley said. If you do that, then you won't be able to bloody well use her. I had no idea what he was getting at, and I did not want to know. I found more and more that I wanted to get the hell out of there, return to the life I had. But could I return to my life? Could I honestly return to the world that I had come from and continue living it? I think this did far too much to me. My mental state would suffer, I was sure. The chances were that I would end up storing this in the back of my mind, and I wouldn't be able to continue on as if it had never happened. There was absolutely no way I could, not after being here. I just wanted to know what had truly happened, since that was still lost on me. What do you mean, use her? I asked cautiously. Both Riley and Devin just looked to me after a moment and grinned. When they did, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was so unnerving and rather creepy. Riley, do your thing, was all Devin said, his voice rather commanding. Riley just nodded and started to approach me. I backed up, not wanting to be anywhere near him. Of course, who would want to? Both of them seemed rather ominous, and I didn't want to find out exactly why. I didn't manage to get far, though, since Kaylee was behind me. I quickly backed into her without realizing it and felt her grab my shoulders. I tried to get out of her grasp, but she seemed to just grasp tighter. "Are you sure she's the one?" Devin asked. "You know if she isn't, you'll pay the price, Riley." "I'm certain," Riley answered. "As I said, she has the mark in her blood." As he spoke, I continued to try to get out of Riley's grasp. I started to feel almost weaker and weaker. I knew it wasn't that exactly. I don't know how I knew, but I did. Instead, I guess you could say that my legs, my body all over. It was more noticeable with my legs, though. Were starting to feel like water. My nerves were being toyed with somehow, and I had no idea how the hell it was happening. As I continued trying to fight out of Kaylee's grasp, which was getting to be notably more difficult with each passing second, Riley approached. He didn't say anything, just grabbed my chin and forced me to look at him. I didn't know what was going on exactly, just knew that it wasn't anything good. It couldn't be anything good. I tried to look away, but something compelled me to keep eye contact. I couldn't focus on anything but the red of his eyes. I didn't have the capacity at the time to notice it, not truly. His eyes and his touch seemed to be drawing me in, and there was no way I could pull away. The last thing I can remember from then was Riley's eyes seeming to glow, seeming to absorb the entirety of me, my body, mind, and soul. I found that the longer I was there, the more I was willing to give myself over to him. I have no idea how long it was before I came to my senses again, nor did I know what happened. All I knew was that when I woke up again, I was bound to a table, faint, groggy, and very disoriented. I couldn't make sense of anything, and it was similar to when I woke up a few weeks ago to the constant beeping. It was nearly instant, once I was awake, fully conscious and aware of what was going on, that I heard something off to the side. I didn't know what it was, or who it was, as I was able to tell that it was someone saying something. After a minute, though, I was able to pinpoint the voice, recall who it was. "I see you're awake," Riley's voice said, and I felt almost as if I was being shoved against a wall and violated or killed. His voice wasn't as calm, nice, sweet as it had been before. No, this time it was rough, sharp, and shattered glass. Just as deadly as well. I started before being cut off. My throat hurt. It felt almost as if something was being torn out of me. I didn't know what it was, but it hurt, almost more than I could handle. "Don't talk, Rebecca," he said, although it sounded more like an order. I found myself getting silent, listening and doing as he said. I had no idea why I was listening, but I was. "Good. Now, I'm amazed you're awake. Most people never wake. Only those that have been like you, sirens, have ever woken again." I didn't know what to say, even if I could. I found myself just stunned. Did he just call me a siren? Weren't those just mythological beings? Did they not exist? Before I could question him on it, or even consider, he continued speaking. "The sole fact that you woke is perfect proof that you are a siren, and indicates that you are, most likely, exactly who we are looking for," he said, a rather dark grin to his voice. I couldn't think. I could barely breathe with how tightly I was bound. What he was saying was far too much. "What do you want with me?" I asked. "Huh? Oh, no one told you. Well, it's rather simple, actually. If we spill your blood, then no one will be able to argue our rule of the world any longer," he answered. It was a rather cliché plan, and I couldn't help but wonder if that was actually what the true reason was. However, of course, I was not about to ask, since there was no way that he would answer me. All I could do was wait and find out. Well, wait and see if I survived long enough to find out. Riley didn't say anything more, and it didn't take long before I heard his footsteps retreating. He was gone before I could say anything, and I was left alone, silence echoing through the room and seeming like it would drive me insane. Perhaps that was their goal, make me outright loco. Maybe that's all they wanted. I had no idea, and I knew I wouldn't find out easily. Before I could even attempt to find out, though, I had to get the hell out of the binds and off the damn table. I, of course, was not having an easy time with it. The leather belts and the nylon ropes were really tight and ridiculously secure. Using the little tricks I'd learned over the years, though, I did manage to get out. Of course, it took me nearly 30 minutes to do so. Not exactly an act that Houdini would be proud of, but at least I got out. I carefully got off the table and cracked my back. It needed it. I had no idea how long I'd been lying prone there, and honestly, I don't think I want to know, even now. I looked around, not knowing where I was and wishing to get some sort of idea. From what I could tell, since there wasn't much light, it looked as if it was an operating room of sorts. At first, it didn't occur to me as to where that was, why it was an operation room, but at about the same time that I felt a rather shocking amount of pain in my arm, I remembered that Kaylee was wearing a nurse's uniform. Was I in hospital? I didn't even know. The past few weeks were a blur to me. I didn't remember anything notable, aside from the couple of instances. Even now, I still don't. Perhaps it was all locked away by my subconscious. Perhaps they somehow managed to erase my memories. I know that's possible, now, but I still doubt they did. But I don't know. I stood there, looking around as the pain scaled up and down my arm, before finally looking to the appendage in question. What I saw there was that it was a rather poorly stitched up, rather nasty gash that someone had managed to put there. What I wanted to know was, what was it from? I couldn't help but wonder that as I looked around again, this time looking for something along the lines of gauze. It didn't take long before I found some, and even less time for me to get a rather simple and probably ineffective in the long run wrapping around the gash. I made a mental note that I would have to go and get that looked at properly after I was out of there, but that would have to wait. I knew I would get out of there, or at the very least I was trying my hardest to convince myself that I would. I think some small part of me was convinced or knew that I wouldn't survive, or at the very least wouldn't be myself any longer. Without dwelling on it, and while trying to shove my fear aside, I made my way to the door and out. The hall was dark, the few lights in the area seeming to flicker slightly. It was rather ominous, and it made me damn happy that I was looking for a way out. Where the hell is... I started to ask where the exit was, but stopped. I heard splashing. Why would I hear splashing down there? Never mind that. I could smell the ocean, and it felt like home to me. I had always loved the ocean, as I said earlier. Any body of water, really. And I quickly found myself making my way towards the sound. When I finally reached the room, I was shocked. Inside the gigantic room, for it had to reach about 50 feet across, at least, there was a huge body of water. It was salt water, too. I don't know how I knew that so easily, but I did. I didn't even register the smell of salt in the air. In the water, though, there were creatures. At the time, I couldn't believe what I'd found. There were at least a dozen of them. Most of them were female, but there were a couple of males in there too, which surprised me. I thought mermaids were only women. What were the men called? Mermen? That didn't sound right to me, but I didn't dwell on it as I stepped forward. Instantly, I found myself being pulled to the surface of the water. One of the mermen had reached up and grabbed my hair. I could see that he had the body of a well-toned pretty boy for his torso, and it looked like his lower half was that of a shark, including the twin pistols that were the trademark of sharks. I found that hard to believe, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from them for a moment before looking at his face as best I could. "Who are you?" he asked me. I just sighed. "My name is Rebecca Knight," I answered. "I'm just looking for a way out." That seemed to appease him for the moment, at the very least, for he let go of my hair and let me sit up a bit. "Are you another of those that are trapped here?" one of the mermaids asked as she approached. Her hair was a gorgeous... "Are you another of those that are trapped here?" one of the mermaids asked as she approached. Her hair was a gorgeous shade of teal that seemed to shift to cyan as it reached the tips, and it matched her eyes perfectly. "Yeah, I am. I woke up here weeks ago," I answered honestly and with a nod. There was no reason to lie to them, was there? "What is this place?" I found myself asking, even before my brain was able to fully understand that I shouldn't ask them that. I didn't know if they would have an unbiased answer, or if they would be biased towards the place in either a good or bad sense. The merman just sighed lightly as he looked to me, before looking to the mermaid that had approached. "This place? It's hell," he answered bluntly. "They are looking for someone that will allow them complete control of everything on this planet, whether they be mortal, magical, or a creature," he continued. I didn't get a chance to say anything. "And all of us here, we're all test subjects. either here to be tested to find out if we're the one they're looking for, or here to be used as something to test various quote-unquote treatments on, he added. What would they do to you? Aren't you guys overly durable? I asked. Not really. You'd be surprised. Fish are rather fragile creatures, one could argue, the mermaid stated. What they have done to some of those that are here, and others that have never returned, I don't think I want to know, he continued. It takes all we have to stay alive most days as well. I listened to his tale, his story. He bore a lot to me. I guess I was one that was easily trusted. I wasn't going to complain. Any information I obtained, I figured I could use, would be extremely useful. At the end, he'd asked for my help. I said if I managed to find a way out, then I would help them escape. I agreed, of course, for I saw some of the scars and open wounds that some of them had. They had my sympathy, definitely. And I found myself just praying that they weren't someone that I could not trust. They had given me one interesting piece of information. The one of them that had been their medic had been taken. Her name? Kaylee. It seemed that the woman I'd met before wasn't there of her own volition, at least not completely. It was possible, if not probable, that she'd been coerced into helping to save the others that were there, or that were back in the ocean she called home. I had no way to know, but I know that when I last saw her, there was something odd in her eyes, something I couldn't put a finger on, but I couldn't forget. As I left, I just sighed slightly and started heading in the direction I thought was east. They had mentioned they were pretty sure that an exit was to the east, but weren't 100% sure. I took their suggestion solely because it seemed as if they needed help just as much as I did, if not more so than I. I was walking for nearly an hour, I think, before I found a door that seemed to be barricaded more than the others. It had several locks on it, and there was no way that I thought it was an exit. If I were to guess, it was the way into the lair of the beast, so to speak. It was probably where the diabolical plans of all this resided, where the ruler of this place sat dormant, waiting, watching. I steeled my nerves, since they were jumping a mile a minute, and sighed slightly as I put my ear to the door to listen. It was mostly silent on the other side, which was odd. I'd expected to hear something, anything, but instead it was pretty close to dead silent in there. The hell? I wondered aloud, not picking up on the footsteps that were approaching me as I focused on the door. I didn't notice the other person until I heard Riley's voice behind me and felt his hand in my hair, pulling me away from said door. I knew it wasn't a good idea to leave you alone, he snarled as he quickly unlocked the door and shoved me in. Inside the room, I could barely breathe. It felt stuffy, unnatural, and ridiculously unbalanced in there. I don't know what it was that felt unbalanced exactly, but something did, and it didn't feel right to me. I didn't get a chance to comment on it, or really think anything of it as I was shoved to the floor. While on my hands and knees, I noticed something there. It seemed that there were far more ants than one would have expected in a room like that. They were almost traveling rhythmically as well. Then again, everything seemed to have a rhythm to me, so it wasn't that surprising. I always found I could concentrate better if I found some sort of beat, some sort of backing music in my life. It was something that I'd always thought was odd, but I find myself thinking that less at the moment. Since Riley had claimed I was a siren, I may not have had time to dwell on it, but it was enough time for me to figure out that maybe, just maybe, he was right. The little bitch decided to snoop. Riley's voice snapped out as I got to my feet and looked around. Almost the entire room was dark. I couldn't see more than 10 feet in front of me. I could feel, though, that the darkness was deep, that there were several feet, if not meters, in the darkness. I knew, as well, that I would end up lost within the depths very easily. I'd never been good with navigation at all. Just as well, was the reply. I couldn't tell where the voice was coming from, since it almost sounded as if it was coming from all around me. It was odd, to say the least. What was it that the one was to think here? Where was one to focus? I quickly found that I couldn't focus. The air in the room was making it hard. Everything was starting to get hazy, but not like how it was when Riley grabbed me before I woke up, bound to the table. It almost felt as if my head was being filled with cotton. I guess that would be a good way to explain it. Perhaps it's high time we stepped up our game. We've had her for nearly 2 months now. I panicked a bit. 2 months? Seriously? How had I lost so much time? It is high time that we set into motion we had planned for generations now. I didn't get a chance to say anything, to move, to even breathe before Riley shoved me towards the darkness, the shadows. I attempted to stop, tried to avoid going in there, and I did succeed for a moment. It was short-lived, that success, for there were suddenly a pair of shadowed arms reaching out and grabbing me. They pulled me in far quicker than I could prepare for, and I found myself on the knees. They pulled me in far quicker than I could prepare for, and I found myself on my knees in the darkness. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. There was nothing there as far as I could see. Even looking behind me towards where it was that I'd come from, and all I could see were shadows. They were everywhere, and it didn't take long before I realized that they were what I was feeling that was suffocating me when I walked in. How Riley wasn't affected, I don't know, and I don't think I want to know. "You're the one," the voice said, as I, barely, heard Riley's footsteps retreating. As the door closed, I felt as if my only means of escape closed with it. I was trapped, and I was quickly finding that I could barely even move, barely breathe. "I'll make you one with me, and you'll help," the voice continued. "With you, we will be able to make it that we aren't feared, at least not as we are." "Oh, what do you mean by that?" I asked, curious and scared. "We're feared because no one understands what we are. All of us non-human, non-normal creatures," the voice answered, some anger to it as I felt some shadowed hands that I couldn't see grasp me. I felt their grip around my arms, my legs, arms around my torso, my head, my neck. It was getting harder to breathe, and I was sure that they would kill me. I wanted to fight them off. I desperately wanted to, but I couldn't. I couldn't move, and it was getting to the point that I could barely even think. It was as if it was starting to meld into me. "We will use you, use your abilities, and make it that we're feared because we deserve it," the voice snarled. "We'll own them, control them. We'll make them our fucking pets." That was it. I couldn't let that happen. Every instinct within me was fighting with the hands, the paralysis, the death that seemed to be on the horizon. I wouldn't give in. I couldn't give in. No, I couldn't. I wouldn't. I felt the grasps loosen a bit. It seemed my determination was enough for the moment. "What are you doing?" the voice snarled before I felt something pull me up to my feet. Moments later, I felt as if I was on a cross or something that I couldn't see. I was above the ground somehow. I knew that, and just hanging there, limp, my arms out as if I was being pulled in half. "I will have you, and you will help," the voice threatened as I felt something get close to me. I couldn't breathe, and it didn't take long before everything was gone. My name is Rebecca Knight. I was an 18-year-old, fresh high school graduate before I was pulled into this world, this place. I'd always been afraid of death, and how I seemed to always be able to get people to do what I wanted. I'd always chalked it up to just being a very charismatic person. But it seems that wasn't the case. It would take me a long time before I would naturally die, but as I am now, I'll never die. Not so long as it wants me kept alive. I was a siren. My shocking blonde locks and deep sea blue eyes helped verify that when I learned it, even if I didn't truly believe it at the time. My voice was my power, and I knew that. I always had, and I always will. Now, though, it's far stronger than it had been before. Of course, everyone thinks I'm insane. There's no such thing as sirens, I'm told. There's no such thing as mermaids or mermen, they say. I know they're wrong, and I know that what I house inside of me is something that could destroy life as everyone knows it. Of course, I will never let it out. I will never allow it to be free. When I finally go to the grave, it will come with me. It will be buried with me. I have it locked away, locked, and there is no key to unlock it. I could get out of there. I could use my voice and get out of the asylum. But no, I'm not going to. I'm going to stay here where I'm safe, where I know that the thing inside of me will stay hidden. I'll let them think I'm insane, that I'm completely and utterly off my rocker. I'll maintain this illusion. It's for the best. It's for everyone else. I don't know what happened to the mer people that I had met, nor do I know what happened to Riley or Kaylee or Devon. I don't think I truly care, though. I'm now 27, and I'm telling my tale. Perhaps someone will find this, and will believe me. If no one does, though, it's just as well. I can keep this world safe. Even if it kills me, I will keep that thing inside of me. I swear it. Now, that is Rebecca's origin story, at least the first bit of it. I did end up going and doing a second short story, and then a third, more novella-style short story. And if you guys want, I can read those too, but they're really nonsensical. Anyway, that's the introduction of Rebecca, and was 9,000 words, if that matters. We're encroaching on an hour. Oh my god, I'm so sorry to bore you. Anyway, I don't know what next week's video will be. I'll figure that out sometime during the week. For now, I'm going to cut this video here. I hope you enjoyed the story, or the art. If you stuck around for the entirety of it, thank you. I really appreciate it. If you didn't, I totally do not fault you. Anyway, I'll catch you later. Okay. See ya. Anyway, I'll catch you on the flip side. This is Amber out. See ya.